So one of the things you don't see in here is a rating. I'm suggesting no rating on this one. And the reason being is because that rating firm is going to expect that we will have received that cash by now. And now I gotta say no.
Right.
So to pay them $8,000 for a rating that could go down a notch, but then turn around and go back up a notch a year later because we get our cash, I think it's not worth the expense. I think we have a better story to say we're gonna go non-rated and explain to the investors that the reason we're doing non-rated is because of this very dynamic. But again, it's a story I gotta be able to tell. Oh, and lastly, the last concern. Your market value of the city dropped about $6-7 million from 13 to 14. You were about 95 million last year, and talking with the assessor's office this last week, 88 million for this year. And I said, well, that just can't be right. Something's wrong. Well, I guess that a lot of sales have taken place that were properties sold for less than what they were being assessed at for property tax purposes. And by law, the county assessor has to be within a certain percentage of actual sales, and so they adjusted residential property down. Same thing I think happened in Crescent. Okay, that's completely outside of your control. All right, but it's a negative credit factor. But what's the story? Well, the story is we still have the same property we did last year. It didn't drop necessarily because a large industry burned to the ground and been rebuilt. So I mean, we still got all the same stuff we did. It's just it's worth less. Okay. And in the financial world, where everything's based on ratios and percentages, if we just kind of spit this out there to the open market, there's no chance to humanize the deal and get the best deal we can again through this negotiated process. I'm beating a dead horse here, so I'll leave that alone for now. All right, so let's look at that. I've got a couple of other exhibits. One is called a summary of sources and uses. And this just breaks out the bond issue that I'm talking about today, as well as these state loans for the utility side of things. And you can see we're looking at total borrowing on the utility side of things about 1.1 something million. That also will be turned over 20 years. It will probably be at an interest rate of around 2%. That is yet to be determined. But I produced this so that I could figure out this exhibit here, which is the summary of all your general obligation debt. Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Captain. Thank you. Okay. Well, first of all, the title of the debt is on the top, and you'll see the third one in from the left says downtown TIF. You see that $65,000 ends next year. That $65,000 payment happens on February 1st of 2015, which means you had to levy for it in 14. That's why I told you that this is the last year. So if you add interest to that, you'd note that your levy for that bond is about 70 grand, which is about what I'm projecting for this new deal, and that's why I made the statement that this should have little or no impact on your budget. But if you go over to the right, you see our outstanding balance. The second line down, it jumps up to 10.5 million, and the reason being is because of those last two issues on the right. And I had to do this to get the sizing on those. The principal payments I'm putting on the PFA loans is my best estimate. It might be slightly different than that, but I'm pretty sure I'm in the ballpark. And then the principal you'll see on the last one on the right comes right from the schedules we just get. So if we look at the debt per capita, if we look at the end of the year 2014, you're looking at just over $6,000, which I understand is a threshold that we've tried to set for ourselves going into the future. A couple of things to say about that. One is, debt per capita is based on your outstanding principal and it's based on your population. The population number here is an estimate, 1,757. That's the latest state demographer's estimate that I could get from the internet. To give you an idea how close we are, if we counted ourselves and we found that we had 8 more people, that 6,028 would be 6,000. If that still sticks in your craw, another strategy would be we could go back remember this contingency that I have in there, that 10%? I could drop that contingency by $50,000 and it would put us right at 6,000. Okay, so we could comply with that policy if we wanted to. You know, I'll leave it to you to decide if that's a factor or not, but we're only briefly there for a few months until we make our first payments in the 2015. You'll see the estimated, oh, that says NV, it should be MV, it's market value there over on the right. The first two numbers are real, everything thereafter is just a projection. But you can see it dropped from 95 million down to 88 million. And that percentage over there on the far right is basically the outstanding debt, geo debt to the market value as a percentage. We'd like to see that number as close to 10% as possible, so you can see where you were at under 10%, and mostly as a product of dropping tax base, it threw us up closer to 12. Right. But again, that gets back to my point of wanting to negotiate the sale. So that's the tough stuff. Why don't I once again stop and see where questions take us?
Any questions for Mike?
So they'll drop off about 600,000 in 2016.
Yep, these payments here are actual scheduled principal payments, not subject to change. The only exception to that is that these last two on the right, we haven't finalized yet, but everything left of that is fixed, known, we can plan for it. So the numbers on the per capita, you know, again, I don't know what your population will be from year to year. It will fluctuate. So that number is somewhat gimmicky.
How does that stand in comparison to Spring Valley?
Spring Valley's probably in that $3,000 range, just shooting from the hip.
So we carry a big debt load.
I consider this a high-level debt. You know, I kind of laid out the three challenges. And the cash reserves and the decreasing tax base, to me, are the biggest concern. And what's the reason? Because number one, the cash reserves were identified in that rating from 2 years ago. And we had no control over those last two. The market value, we don't have any control over that sort of thing. Population, we don't have control over. But we've planned for this sort of debt for a while. And we've known that it's going to jack up our debt. And our plan, I don't believe we have any other borrowing plans in the near future, correct? From what I saw in our last notes, this was sort of supposed to be it for a while, right?
Better not.
Right.
Better not.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on how those goats work out.
Did she say it ate buckthorn? Did I hear?
Yeah.
Oh,
Shooting
man,
below.
boy, I could have about 100 goats on.
Oh, there might be a business opportunity. Public works.
Now,
Or butcher.
I am not concerned whatsoever. I am 100% confident in my ability to go out there and come back to you in, let's say, a month with a proposal. Your ability to get the funds are not in question. What's in question is I want to try and get you the best deal I can in light of the changes. And I think I've got a fair reflection here. In fact, maybe I even got a little push.
So what is your estimate of interest rate?
Well, right now, I'm showing you 3.8. And I'm hoping I can nail that or maybe even do a little better. But, you know, give or take, let's say 20 basis points would be safe. So let's call it between 3.6 and 4. I think I can nail that. Well, let me, sometimes my mouth gets me in trouble. As you can tell on my leg. Interest rates over the next month can change. Given, you know, if the market stays where it is today, I can nail that. You know, interest rates could go up 2 points.